part of that certainly is that this post-revolution generation was coming of age, and they were increasingly frustrated with social restrictions, and really started to ignore all of the laws that are still technically on the books in Iran. And I write about this in my book as the as-if generation, because I spent time with these young people. I lived with them. They were my friends. And just to paint a picture of daily life for you there, even though, for example, the veil and Islamic sort of modest dress is mandated by the government, it's become so casually enforced and so ignored that when you go to Tehran today, other than the fact that there's usually a scarf on women's heads, they don't look as the images that you probably remember seeing from Iran, which is just these big black tents and this sort of small slit through which you see eyes. There's lots of color. It's just something that's, women wear things that are like tunics, sleeves to here. It's becoming more and more liberal every single day, to the point where I think you wouldn't really, if you took a snapshot, other than the veils, you would think that you were seeing, young people in any place in the Middle East. Young people go to movies together, they have parties, they go to concerts. All of these is sort of, they push the boundaries, and it's sort of within a certain set of limitations. For example, at concerts, they can't jump up and dance because dancing in public in a mixed group is illegal, but there are concerts, and there weren't, 10 years ago. There are women participating in all realms of daily life. I used to live in Cairo, and something that I like to bring up is just the difference for me when I went back to Iran. I noticed, my goodness, there are women on the street every hour of the day. They're going to work, they're on the bus, in the evenings they're out on the streets. It wasn't quite that way in Cairo. Many women stayed at home, they didn't work, and it was just much more rare to see women plentifully out there in the streets. It's changing now, of course, a little bit in Cairo, but you could even use the example of places in the Gulf. But to just give you a sense that when you go to Tehran, you really see that women are an active, visible part of daily life. They work in banks, they own businesses, they drive cars. They are managers in government offices. There are programs designed to bring them up from sort of levels of clerkship. And so you don't really get the sense that, that women are cloistered and at home at all. When I first moved there in 2000, there was definitely a youth movement of a political one. There was a thought movement of organizing around politics, but there was also just this emphasis on using daily life and ordinary behavior as a realm for pushing change. Women would wear tons of makeup just to make the point that this is my body and it's my personal right to do with it as I want. And occasionally they would be rounded up by police for this. But as I grew to see, when there's just a critical mass of young people or young women doing these things, it becomes unfeasible for the government to crack down on thousands of women. There just are not the resources, and there's the risk of just alienating 70% of the population. So slowly over time, the ways that young people sort of increasingly pushed just created a space where that became safe and everyday. Things like satellite television are still illegal, for example, but if you took an aerial shot above from Tehran, you would see like mushrooms. Every single house has them, and they're hardly ever rounded up anymore, which is important because that means Iranians have other news sources to expand their context for how they see what's going on inside the country and the world, because state media, of course, is censored and very much sort of state propaganda. Something that I write a lot about in my book is attitudes towards America, because I think some of the colorful things about young Iran are these ways or these phenomena in which young people express their discontent for the regime. I think one of those is this embrace of American popular culture. In my book, I write a lot about how American-style fast food places with sort of fake names like McStar Burger or Kentucky, some other verb, chicken, would spring up and would become hugely popular. They would be mobbed, young people would line up outside, there would be bouncers at the door. Young people who couldn't even pronounce Valentine's Day would buy fuzzy pink hearts on February 14th and give them to their sweethearts. There was this real, on the one hand, I think, there's the political reality, which is that up until recently, Iran was really the last bubble of pro-American sentiment in the Middle East. There was an opinion poll run about 4 years ago that showed that about 80% of the population supported reestablishing diplomatic ties with the U.S. So I think there was a willingness to give Washington the benefit of the doubt in the region. There was a sense that America symbolized all of this lifestyle and cultural openness that young people craved in their own lives. And so this just manifested itself in this taste for American pop culture. And obviously, also because the state, as part of its official ideology, is still very anti-American. Every Friday, at official Friday prayers, they chant "Death to America" and burn the American flag. And so for young people, adoring America in this very sort of public way, going to these fast food places, wearing these clothes, listening to American hip-hop music, was a way of registering dissent and anger with the government, but in a very safe way. If you're going to chant "Death to America," then I will eat hamburgers and celebrate Valentine's Day, because that is a safe way for me to communicate to myself and to you that you don't represent me, that I reject you. Because the price of personal activism, of political organizing, of writing an opinion piece in a newspaper is very high, and the state so aggressively cracks down on its critics that the price of real dissent is too high for ordinary young people. And so this is a safe way of communicating that. I write a little bit about plastic surgery, but this is something I probably won't go into too much. I should just say that Tehran is the nose job capital of the world. Many of you have probably heard this. I wrote for the LA Times about this too. And this sort of goes back to young people and women especially using the only realm of their body that for many years they were allowed to show in public as a place where they could manipulate their appearance, they could express themselves. This is my body, I want to be modern, and so since I can't wear precisely what I want, I will re-engineer my face. Which is sad in its own way, but I think speaks to how unwilling young people are to just passively accept all of the prescriptions and the restrictions of the state. So with all of this youth activism, whether it's political students organizing and holding demonstrations, which was extremely common up until about 2 years ago, with all of these young people pushing for change through daily life, how did we get to today when we have a hardline president who was elected in a seemingly and acceptably, I would say, democratic process? Has all of this changed? What has happened? Well, I think to parse the events of the last year or two and to understand how we went from this very hopeful, vibrant moment where there was a liberal, democratically minded president and a youth movement to today where we have the Bush administration talking about or leaks of possible nuclear strikes and going back to those old hostage-taking era images of Iran and the sense that Iran is once again a major threat to the world, a threat to the United States, to peace and security. How does this all fit together?